Hello, Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. With the Giants at 2-11, it's becoming more and more pointless to talk about the games, to talk about the season. Really, one of the big topics right now is who's going to be the next head coach for the New York Giants. And one of the guys at the top of that list is Los Angeles Rams defensive coordinator Chris Shula. So here to help us learn a little bit about Chris Shula is Erin Coscarelli, Rams insider for Believe in Rams and FanDuel Sports Network West. Erin's been on the show before, and we appreciate you hopping on again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I don't know if I'm a little delayed. Gosh, we talked about technology earlier in the off camera. So if I'm super delayed, sorry about that.
That's you know what? There's not much we can do about the internet connection sometimes. It is what it is. But we'll muddle through regardless.
We'll
So,
manage. Yeah.
all
So
right.
thank you for having me
So,
on. I think it's interesting to talk about what's next. And of course, obviously, a lot of people, despite what happened last week, are all in on the Rams.
mhm.
So it's great to talk to you and maybe see why you think Chris Shula is a favorite, and maybe I can give you some context as to why he's so beloved in Rams HQ.
Well, let me start with this. From an outside perspective, we had a chance to talk to Joe Shane earlier this week, and there's a lot of conversation about the Giants have been awful now for 3 years, for most of the last 10 or 12 years. There's a lot of conversation about whether or not this is an attractive head coaching job. Joe Shane insists that it is. Uh, so I'm curious, just from an outside perspective, um, what you think, what you hear about whether this is a job that a guy like Chris Shula, who's looked at as one of the top candidates in the upcoming cycle, is that a job he's going to be banging the table trying to get?
It's a good question. I had asked Gary Klein of the LA Times, who I sit next to when we do our pressers. I asked him that. I said, why would he want to leave LA? His family loves it. He gets to work with his bestie and Sean McVay. They've known each other for years. They get along great. And then to go to a New York media market where it's a little tougher your expectations are high. You want results, and you're like in great weather, your kids are happy here in sunny California, and then to go and take on not just a team that needs sort of a development of a young quarterback, but maybe a culture change.
Hmm.
And the culture in LA, every single time a new player comes to the building, and I don't know, I'm sure you've heard of it because Devontae talked about it before he caught a ball in season. He said there's no dark cloud hanging over the building. He said punters hang out with quarterbacks, kickers hang out with wide receivers. So the culture here in LA is just unlike anywhere else. Would he be willing to give all of that up, this very sort of comfortable job? And I asked Gary, I told you when I had asked him, he said, not a lot of these types of opportunities come up for these potential coaches. I think for him, for Chris Shula, it's is he capable of putting a staff in place where he can focus on the defense and give your quarterback and the culture sort of a boost that it hasn't seen before? And I agree with you. There's something about why is it so hard to coach a winning franchise for the Giants? Like, I wonder that myself.
Yeah, I think we all wonder that, and I don't think the Giants have found the right answer since they revoked Tom Coughlin's key card, which is going on 10 years now. So it I think what it speaks to, um, I look at the Giants played the New England Patriots this weekend, got destroyed, and it's probably one of the few games this year in which the Giants were simply non-competitive. And I just look at what Mike Vrabel has done in New England,
Mhm.
just in changing the culture there. Um, and in establishing, I look at all of these guys, and you've been in plenty of locker rooms. An NFL locker room, throw the practice squad guys in there, and you're talking about a locker room full of 70 players, all of whom, or most of whom, are probably alpha males. And you're talking about a head coach needing to be the guy that can stand in front of that room of alpha males
Mhm.
and make them buy his message, make
Mhm.
them follow what he wants, make them accountable to the standard that he wants. So I guess that, the question for me, the Giants haven't had that guy, and Brian Dable was a good offensive mind, but he wasn't that guy. I think his interactions and his what we've learned about Abdul Carter the last few weeks kind of speaks to that, with two benchings in 3 weeks. I guess my question for you is, Chris Shula would be a first-time guy as
Yeah.
a head coach. What would lead what would lead the Giants, or what would lead anyone to believe that that's a situation he could walk into and do what Ben Johnson has done in Chicago, which is really take charge of that situation
Yeah.
and and set that culture and get guys to buy his message?
Yeah, I mean, that's another really good question, and I think it's not just what we see on the football field that equates to the win-loss record. It's what happens, in the four walls of the facility. And, just to extract the storyline of why I think he would be great anywhere is because of his ability to evaluate talent. And I know it's an entire, system evaluation, and obviously it starts with less need. But just take the fact that we brought in a guy by the name of Emmanuel Forbes Jr. If we're just going to talk about the defense, Emmanuel Forbes Jr. was, I want to say, the 16th overall pick in
Exactly. Mhm.
2023. And he was a cast off. Like Washington wasn't able to bring out the best, and then he comes to LA. He had a tough game, and I believe it was because safety Quentin Link has been out with injury, and Forbes was needing. I think in some ways he was helpful in settling him with his pre-snap adjustments. But aside from that game, Emmanuel Forbes has been an absolute stud for this defense. I think he'd had like a pick, and I don't know if it was like in every single game, but certainly he has shown up. And the belief in what he could produce says to me not just how good this coaching staff is, but the ability to evaluate, bring the best out of his players. You take Nate Landman, who was another sort of, he was an undrafted guy brought on by Atlanta, and then kind of a forgotten, and it gets brought over to LA, becomes a team captain, is now one of the most vocal guys. I think he's had at least four forced fumbles. I think that's tied for the most. How does that translate when these are guys that otherwise in different systems hadn't worked out? So
Right.
I think it's a combination of, he has a football legacy. He is an alpha male. He can connect with other young alpha males, and he
Mhm.
finds a way to bring together people, much like obviously he's learned it from the best in Coach McVay. It translates in bringing out the best in its players. So yes, he hasn't had a first time head coaching job, and like I honestly think if that's what, I don't know if he'd be interested in, to go from an LA very comfortable winning culture and then having to totally like redevelop it and reinvest in it and really start from scratch. I mean, there's not a better guy that can do it, but is it the right opportunity for him? Is I wonder, you know.
Yeah, I mean, as you kind of indicated, there's only 32 of those jobs.
Mhm.
And in those 32 jobs, when guys start looking for jobs, my thinking would be, there's not a lot of those jobs where you already start with a franchise quarterback on a rookie contract
Mhm.
and a few other pieces. And I would, from and that's, I guess, despite the losing and the culture building that you have to do, that's why I wonder, if and it's New York where it's not easy, but if you win, there is a certain there's a certain legacy and a certain history that always gets attached to you,
Mhm.
if you have that success. So it's but especially with the quarterback. I mean, unless those of us who are sort of inside of it and looking at Jackson Dart overvalue what everybody else thinks about Jackson Dart. So I guess that would be the question is, that I would have for you is it that attractive to build something with Jackson Dart?
I think the reason coaches coach in the NFL is their competitive spirit. Someone believed in them and brought out the best in them. And you hit the nail on the head. The Giants have one of the most storied legacy franchise in the history of the NFL. To totally turn the culture and the franchise and the legacy around. I mean, I remember when I was at NFL Network, how beloved Tom Coughlin was. For Shula to carry on, almost that same grandfather legacy that Don Shula was able to do, I'm sure he would love it. Now, does he have the staff that he would feel good enough to rally around Dart is the question. And then I keep going back to how tough the New York media and the fan base is. And I think if there's a guy there's no guy better for the task than someone who's been tested in adversity. Remember too, when it comes to Chris Shula, he didn't have Aaron Don. He's only been a DC for 2 years. He didn't have the first year he was tasked with an Aaron Donald-less team, right? Aaron Donald's no longer there. What did he do? He drafted Jared Verse, turned Jared Verse into defensive rookie of the year. And like I said, he's managed to turn that defensive line, and even the secondary into one of the scariest defenses. And just because this last week's performance is, I think, a blip, this team is still a very scary team. And, obviously they're going to go on the road again and face the Cardinals. But when it comes to adversity, this coach and Chris Shula has the capacity. I just, again, will go back to, does he want to uproot his family and really start all over again? And that's what he would have to do.
I wanna know, you asked about or you were talking about, uh, does he have the right staff or would he have the right staff, to so that what he would do is concentrate on the defense, and I will admit I'm a big fan of the CEO type head coach, but obviously, Chris Shula's background is defense, and if you're going to bring in a defensive guy to and have him focus on the defense, you need the right offensive people around him. Do you have any inkling of who he might bring with him? Is it even possible that if he were to come in, that he might try to convince someone like Mike Kafka, who's been Jackson Dart's offensive coordinator, to stay? So I'm curious, what kind of offensive staff you think he might be able to assemble, if you have any ideas on that.
Yeah, I wish I could give you the inside tea on that one. But again, if you've been in the NFL as long as Shula's been, and you've worked with McVay as long as McVay, and seen what McVay's been able to do, you know, the other thing too that was really interesting, and I know you're aware of this, Stafford didn't throw a single ball in training camp. Okay.
Mhm.
And, still, I think is the passing touchdown leader. And granted, yes, he had 3 turnovers, 2 interceptions last week. This guy has been clean. He has witnessed sort of an unprecedented situation in a 37-year-old quarterback that everybody was willing to sort of say, and, signed a very favorable contract. I think I can't give insight into who he would pluck and put in place. I think you're right. I think it would need to be somebody that's obviously very familiar with his development. I think he would be a CEO type coach. But he has seen all the things that you could possibly imagine what could go wrong. Like literally going, okay, our franchise quarterback might not even be available week one against Houston if he takes one weird like fall or slip because he has this aggravated disc. I don't necessarily always think it's about the X's and O's. It's more
Mhm.
about the Jimmys and Joes, as they like to say. And this is somebody who is so smart in moments of stress. And this team has had so much stress, even dating back to not just last season, but the season before. Every time their bye has come, they've had a losing record, right? And then they
Mhm.
managed to turn things around. I think that says so much more about a coaching staff and the players that they coach than I think it has anything to do with the personnel.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, for my money, I think owners a lot of times make the mistake of looking um, at the latest and greatest guy with the coolest new offensive scheme and think that he could be the head coach, and it's more about dealing with the people and being able to lead the people and hold the people accountable.
Yeah, it's you can only expect your team to rise to the level of your own ability. And if you can't connect with the players and problem solve and deal with stress, and I think that's not that that's been the biggest issue with the Giants, but it's almost like they just can't get out of their own way. And look what the Rams were able to do with the draft. I mean, now they have 2 first round picks. Thank you very much, Raheem Morris. Again, another coordinator of Sean McVay's that went on to try to carve out their own future. And that might be also another thing Shula could be thinking about. Take not that it hasn't worked out for every single former, but Sean McVay has had 7 different former assistants or coordinators move on, and they still can't really replicate what McVay is doing. So I don't know. If it were me, I'd want to be in the McVay camp for as long as I possibly can until like the most perfect situation were to come up, right? Like one of the most perfect situations that came up for a coach was, in my opinion, Jim Harbaugh getting to come back, and obviously Herbert's dealing with what he's dealing with. But like, what a great opportunity! Guy gets to stay, gets to be in LA, gets to work with Herbert. So I don't know.
Yeah. But that's kind of what Ben Johnson did too, because he was on that circle for or on that circuit for 2 or 3 years,
Yeah.
and he sort of picked his opportunity in Chicago, with the quarterback that he wanted to work with, and yeah, I could definitely see Chris Shula doing that. I do think there's a lot of reasons for the Giants job to be attractive, but I can also certainly see when you look at it, it's not even about the it's not even necessarily that there's a lack of talent because I think there's more talent than a 2-11 record would indicate. Not that there's enough talent, but there's more than
Hmm.
than you might think. I think it's about standards and accountability and leadership and who's in charge. But I also did want to ask you, I think it's you said 7 on the McVay tree. I think it's 8 if you actually count Raheem Morris, which is sort of cheating because he had been a head coach before. But,
Mm.
and it's been up and down. Some of those guys have been really good. Matt LaFleur, some people love him in Green Bay and some people don't, but he's been a winner. Brandon Staley didn't work out so well with the Chargers, but I guess the thing I was interested in, and you just can't. You said you hit on it. You can't replicate if you hire somebody off the Sean McVay tree. You're not hiring Sean McVay. All right. And all these teams that used to hire people off the Bill Belichick tree, they wanted a piece of what Belichick did, but you're not hiring Bill Belichick. And unfortunately, they hired a bunch of guys who tried to be Belichick and couldn't. What I'm curious about is the Jay Glazer report. where he said that to his knowledge, Sean McVay had spent more time mentoring and letting Chris Shula into the really inside workings of how McVay did his job, than he had with any of these other guys. And I'm curious what you might know about that and how you think that might help Shula when he does take his opportunity.
Yeah, I heard that too. Didn't Peter Schrager say that?
I thought it was Glazer, but
Oh, you might.
regard
Oh, you know what? I think it was on the Fox broadcast. You're right. That's
Mhm.
right. It was Jay Glazer. And maybe Schrager expounded on it a little bit. Um, my take is what they want is they want to buy in on that culture. It's the same thing that happened with the Jags. The Jags want to turn around that culture and they want in on whatever magic, and it is magic in LA. Like
Mhm.
when I show up every time I go to Rams HQ, which is in Woodland Hills, and I interviewed Aubrey Pleasant. One of the things that Coach McVay always does is he never takes any credit. He's the most generous when he is giving it to what he sees that's great in other people, and he's the first to take responsibility and protect his guys when things are not going well, which obviously he did this last week. If you check out his presser, his post game presser, he said it's not going to happen again, and we're going to be tighter than ever because of this. And even when I interviewed Aubrey Pleasant, and he had said Aubrey is the first person that will check in on the guys, but before he checks in on the guys and he says, "How you doing?" he says what he's going through. So it's like this is a lead by example, and yes, I think whether if he goes to New York, he's going to be sorely missed for sure in LA, but I think any team is just going to is trying to capitalize on what we see every day in Rams HQ, and there is nothing like it. McVay is like he's so like thoughtful and present even to the media. He addresses us by our name. He gives us a thorough answer. So, I mean, he gets it and he doesn't have to be that way. And that's the other thing. I'm like, this guy doesn't have to be so generous with his answer or meticulous or thoughtful or philosophical. But I don't know. Maybe it's combined with his young age, his grandfather, his
Mhm.
relationship with his dad. He always talks about. And I think, yes, Shula, because of his long relationship, I think they played together in college or like they certainly grew up together. I think because of how long they've known each other, Shula has been so welcomed and trusted by McVay. And whoever gets Shula is going to be very, very lucky because they're just going to be tapping into that whole relationship that he's had his whole life with Sean McVay.
Well, Aaron, you've convinced me of that, but even more so, I think you've convinced me that the idea is to steal McVay.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Hey.
Good luck with that.
Aaron, I appreciate the time. Thank you as always. If you want to give people a quick idea where they can find you on socials, go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that you pick my brain about what I see every day at Rams HQ because it's not just the wins and losses, but it's how they handle those wins and losses that I think is the most fascinating. So I'm curious to see how all this pans out with Chris Shula. You can check me out. I'm on X, Erin Coscarelli. Just Google it because it's a long, lots of vowels in that last name. I'm on Instagram, and a very few times I guess I go on TikTok, but mostly X and Instagram.
All right. Thank you very, very much. Giants fans, thank you as always for watching. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.